The day had started like any other at the naval base. The sun was barely up, spilling its golden light across the rows of buildings and the neatly lined-up vehicles. Soldiers were already moving quickly, some jogging, some checking their equipment, and the base was filled with the low hum of activity. Among all this movement, the janitor moved quietly. She was a single mother, and her life had been a constant balancing act between work, responsibilities, and raising her child. She pushed her cleaning cart along the wide corridor, humming softly to herself. To anyone watching, she looked ordinary, just another worker keeping the base clean. No one paid her much attention, except to occasionally nod or greet her politely. She had learned to stay invisible, blending into the background so she could do her job without interruptions. She had mastered the art of being unnoticed, but underneath that calm, everyday exterior was someone extraordinary. Few could guess the life she had led before, a life filled with challenges, danger, and courage. Today, however, that ordinary appearance was about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. The base was buzzing with excitement because the SEAL Admiral was making a surprise visit. High-ranking officers rarely came by without notice, and when they did, everyone felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. The Admiral was known for his sharp mind, strict discipline, and sense of humor, which could be sharp or kind depending on the situation. Today, he was in a playful mood, joking with the soldiers as he inspected the base. He asked questions, laughed at their answers, and seemed to enjoy the attention, moving from one group of people to another. The soldiers answered quickly, trying to impress him while hiding their nerves. When he reached the janitorial staff, he paused. He looked at her with a mischievous grin and said, "And what's your call sign?" The question was meant as a joke. The janitor, dressed in her uniform of plain clothes and cleaning gloves, looked up at him. For a moment, she just stared, as if considering whether she should play along. The Admiral chuckled, assuming she would respond with something silly or funny, perhaps a nickname about her broom or mop. Most people in her position would have laughed, trying to ease the moment. But she didn't. She straightened up slightly, her calm presence surprising everyone around her. The corridor, which had been filled with the usual noise of base life, seemed to quiet down just a little as her eyes met his. She had a look that was both composed and firm, a look that made people instinctively pay attention. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear. She said, "Night Viper." The words hung in the air like a sudden, sharp wind. For a moment, nobody moved. Some soldiers blinked, unsure if they had heard correctly. The Admiral laughed nervously, not understanding the weight of the name. To him, it seemed like a playful answer, just a random, clever nickname. But even as he laughed, he felt a strange unease. There was something about the way she said it, calm, confident, and precise, that didn't match the image of a janitor pushing a mop. It was almost as if the name carried power, history, and authority all at once. The janitor, meanwhile, returned to her work, continuing to push her cart down the corridor. She didn't boast or explain herself. She didn't need to. Her reputation, or rather the story behind that call sign, was something that existed in shadows and whispers, known only to a few who had served in certain missions. It was a name tied to courage, skill, and secrets that could not be spoken aloud. Those who recognized it, even partially, felt a chill, realizing this woman had a history far beyond what they had imagined. As the Admiral moved on, joking with other staff and soldiers, some of the nearby personnel exchanged confused looks. How could a janitor have such a name? Was it a joke? Or did it mean something else entirely? Their curiosity grew, and rumors began to form quietly among the soldiers. But the janitor ignored them all. She had learned long ago that attention was dangerous and unnecessary. Her life had taught her to focus, to be precise, and to keep her extraordinary skills hidden unless the moment demanded them. In those few minutes, the janitor had changed the atmosphere of the base without even trying. What seemed like a simple, playful question had revealed a hint of a powerful past, a shadow of extraordinary abilities, and a calm confidence that demanded respect. The SEAL Admiral, for all his experience and authority, had felt a flicker of surprise, an emotion rare for someone in his position. He didn't yet understand why, But there was something about Night Viper that made him pause, even for a second. It was the start of a day that would reveal the truth behind the calm, quiet janitor. A woman who, to most, looked ordinary, but who carried a history so remarkable that it could freeze even the most experienced and confident people around her. And as she pushed her cart down the corridor, humming softly, no one could have guessed that this day would be remembered for years, not for the Admiral's visit, but for the moment when a single name, spoken calmly, changed everything. While the janitor quietly continued her work in the bustling naval base, no one really knew the story behind her calm and disciplined nature. To the outside world, she appeared ordinary, just a single mother working a humble job to make ends meet. But life, as she had learned, was never simple. Each day for her had been a balancing act, a careful juggling of responsibilities and dreams, challenges and survival. Raising her child alone meant she had no room for mistakes, no space for weakness, and no time to dwell on what others thought of her. She had learned to be strong in silence, to face hardships without complaint, and to navigate the world with a sharp mind and steady hands. Her mornings were a rush. Before anyone else in the household stirred, she would wake up to prepare her child's breakfast, pack lunches, and get them ready for school. Even the small joys, like watching her child laugh over a simple cartoon, carried the weight of gratitude and fleeting happiness. She rarely allowed herself to stop and reflect, because time was always pressing, and responsibilities were never ending. Once the home routine was managed, she would put on her uniform and head to the naval base, blending into the background as the janitor who quietly cleaned hallways, offices, and training rooms. It was ironic in many ways. The very job that made her seem ordinary was also what shielded her extraordinary past. The janitor's calm exterior, the mop she pushed, and the quietly polite nods she exchanged with soldiers were all part of a carefully maintained cover. Those who saw her every day would never guess that this woman had a history most could only read about in secret files. She had been trained in ways that went beyond ordinary military knowledge. She had faced situations that tested the limits of human courage, endurance, and skill. And yet, she carried it all lightly, as though it were a distant memory. Her life before the base had been vastly different. She had been part of a specialized unit, one whose missions were often classified, dangerous, and far removed from ordinary comprehension. Those missions required absolute focus, fearless action, and complete dedication. Mistakes were not just costly, they could be fatal. She had been given a call sign, Night Viper, a name that commanded respect and instilled fear in those who had heard it. It was not a name that could be casually mentioned or understood by outsiders. And after years of service, she had made a choice. She left that world behind, stepping away from the battlefield to build a life that was quieter but no less challenging. Her colleagues at the base, most of whom were unaware of her past, treated her like anyone else. Sometimes, they exchanged brief conversations about cleaning schedules or small daily annoyances. She rarely joined in on casual chatter because she had learned long ago that attention was dangerous and unnecessary. She had witnessed situations where one careless word could undo months of careful planning or put lives at risk. So she spoke little, observed much, and let her actions quietly speak for her. Even when the SEAL Admiral asked her call sign, she answered truthfully but without any attempt to impress. It was a fact, not a boast. And yet, that one answer would reveal more than she intended in that moment. Despite her extraordinary past, she was deeply human. She worried about her child, about bills, about whether she was giving enough love and guidance. She felt exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. There were days when the weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest, making her question whether she could continue. Yet, she carried on. Every step, every task, and every decision was guided by a mixture of duty, love, and discipline. Her past had taught her that preparation and focus were the keys to survival, and she applied those lessons every single day, not on the battlefield, but in life itself. Her work at the base, though simple on the surface, required attention to detail. Cleaning rooms, maintaining order, and moving quietly through corridors demanded a level of awareness that few noticed. But she was always alert, always observing. She knew who entered which rooms, what the mood of each team was, and even small changes in the environment. That awareness, honed through years of elite training, now served a different purpose. It ensured safety, efficiency, and order in a world far less dangerous but still demanding. As she moved through the base that day, pushing her cart and performing her duties, she became a figure of quiet strength. Soldiers might glance at her and see nothing more than the janitor, the woman who kept the corridors clean. But for those attuned to the subtle details, the way she moved, the calm confidence she radiated, the precision with which she handled even the smallest tasks, there was something different, something extraordinary. Her presence carried the weight of experience, courage, and unspoken power. Even the SEAL Admiral, in his experience and authority, had sensed it the moment she uttered Night Viper. It was more than just a call sign. It was a story, a history, a reminder that heroism often hides where you least expect it. And as the janitor continued her day, she remained unaware of the whispers and glances, the curious thoughts forming among those who had heard the name. She simply focused on her work, as she always did, proving that extraordinary people often do not seek recognition, but instead continue quietly, guided by duty, discipline, and love. And so, behind the mop and the ordinary uniform, there lived a woman whose life had been filled with danger, courage, and honor. She was not just a single mother or a janitor. She was someone who had faced challenges far beyond the imagination of those around her, and who now carried that strength into her everyday life, quietly shaping her world with skill, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. The moment had arrived. The SEAL Admiral, with his commanding presence and playful smirk, leaned slightly forward, expecting a humorous answer. He had asked the janitor, a single mother who quietly moved through the corridors with her cleaning cart, for her call sign as a joke. To him, it was just a light-hearted moment, something to break the routine of the day. He imagined her replying with something silly, maybe related to her mop or the way she moved around the base. A nickname like Mop Queen or Cleaner Supreme might have made everyone laugh. But what happened next shattered every expectation. The janitor paused, just for a brief moment, letting her eyes meet his. There was a calm intensity in her gaze that made even the seasoned Admiral feel a subtle unease. He was a man used to commanding rooms, to being the authority, yet her composed, unwavering stare held a weight he couldn't immediately place. Then, in a voice that was steady and deliberate, she spoke two words, Night Viper. Time seemed to slow. The words hung in the air, sharp and precise, carrying a strange power. The corridor, which moments ago had been filled with the hum of activity, seemed to quiet down just a little. Soldiers who had been passing by slowed their steps. Some blinked in disbelief. Even the Admiral's smirk faltered. He laughed nervously, not fully understanding the meaning behind the name. To him, it still seemed like a clever or quirky nickname. But deep down, something told him that this was no ordinary response. The janitor returned to her work, her movements calm and purposeful. She pushed the cart with the same measured rhythm she had carried every day, but now there was an unmistakable aura around her. A sense that beneath her quiet, unassuming exterior was someone far more remarkable than anyone in the room had imagined. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. The name Night Viper wasn't just a title. It carried history, experience, and danger. Those few who had been stationed on certain missions recognized the weight of it immediately, though they did not speak aloud. For the rest, it was a mysterious, almost eerie response that sparked curiosity and speculation. The Admiral, a man of years in service and countless experiences, suddenly realized that he had underestimated this woman. He had assumed she was just a regular worker, perhaps a mother juggling responsibilities and nothing more. He had thought her answer would be light-hearted or amusing, something to be chuckled at and forgotten in seconds. Instead, he found himself hesitating, unsure whether he should probe further or leave her alone. The confidence and calm in her demeanor told him that this was someone who had faced far more challenging situations than he could imagine. The kind of situations where every decision mattered, where mistakes could cost lives. Around them, whispers began to form. Some soldiers exchanged quick, puzzled glances. Who was she really? How could a janitor have such a powerful, intimidating call sign? A few of the more seasoned members of the team recognized the words, though they did not fully understand the story behind them. Night Viper was a name associated with elite, classified missions, operations so secret that only a handful of people had knowledge of them. The janitor's past was hidden, carefully erased from public records, but the echoes of it lingered, and now, in that corridor, it seemed to resurface. Despite the murmurs and the nervous energy around her, the janitor remained unshaken. She did not smile, did not explain, and did not boast. She had learned long ago that her actions, not her words, were what truly defined her. In her past, attention could be dangerous and recognition even more so. She had survived because she understood the value of discretion, of moving quietly while accomplishing what needed to be done. And now, in this ordinary corridor, surrounded by everyday people, she carried the same quiet power. The Admiral watched her, trying to process what he had just witnessed. There was an undeniable authority in the way she moved, in the confidence in her eyes, and in the calmness of her voice. He could not shake the feeling that he was looking at someone who had seen and done things far beyond his imagination. Even the simple act of pushing a mop seemed purposeful, precise, almost like a soldier moving with practiced efficiency in a training ground. Every movement, every glance, spoke of discipline and control, and it made him realize that this woman was far more than she appeared. In that moment, the ordinary day at the naval base changed. The janitor, who had been quietly performing her duties for months or even years, became the center of a subtle yet powerful shift in attention. She had revealed, with just 2 words, that she was someone extraordinary. The room held its collective breath as the meaning of her call sign began to settle, even if only partially, in the minds of those around her. Night Viper was no joke, and it was certainly no ordinary nickname. It was a statement, a warning, and a glimpse into a life that had been hidden in plain sight. As she continued her work, unbothered by the sudden awareness around her, it became clear that her story was not about seeking recognition or admiration. She had chosen a life of quiet resilience, of hard work, and of balance between her past and present. But now, her extraordinary history had surfaced, if only slightly, and the Admiral, and everyone else who had heard her words, would never look at her the same way again. The janitor was no longer invisible. She was someone to be watched, respected, and perhaps even feared, for the strength behind Night Viper was real, and it was undeniable. After the janitor had spoken her call sign, the atmosphere in the corridor subtly shifted. What had started as a light-hearted moment with the SEAL Admiral had transformed into a quiet, tense curiosity. People began to exchange glances, whispers starting softly at first, then growing as more soldiers and staff tried to piece together the meaning behind Night Viper. No one could deny that there was something unusual about her, something that didn't fit the ordinary image of a janitor quietly pushing a mop through the base. Some of the soldiers who had served in elite missions suddenly felt a chill. They remembered hearing the name before, though never openly discussed. Night Viper was a code name from operations so secret that only a few high-ranking personnel had access to the information. These missions were dangerous beyond imagination, ones that required skill, courage, and precision. The very name carried a reputation, a weight, and even a hint of fear. And now, standing quietly in the hallway, was the woman who had earned it, yet she seemed almost invisible to the untrained eye. The whispers spread quickly but discreetly. "Did you hear that? That's Night Viper." "No way. She's just the janitor, isn't she? I think she used to be on missions with SEALs years ago." Curiosity, awe, and disbelief filled the room as people tried to reconcile the janitor they saw every day. The gentle, quiet woman, with the legend that had just surfaced. Her past, carefully hidden for years, was suddenly brushing against the present, creating a ripple of shock and fascination throughout the base. Despite all the attention, she continued her work without a hint of change in her behavior. The mop glided across the polished floor with precision, each movement smooth and purposeful. She had long learned the value of staying calm under scrutiny. Years of operating in high-stakes, classified missions had trained her to perform flawlessly, even under pressure. Attention could be dangerous, and recognition even more so, so she remained composed, letting her actions speak louder than words. She had seen what could happen when people underestimated her, and she had no desire to draw unnecessary focus to herself. Yet, her quiet demeanor now only made the whispers louder. People couldn't help but notice the extraordinary calm she carried with her. The SEALs, some of whom were new recruits, were especially intrigued. They had been taught about code names and elite operatives, but most of their lessons existed only in theory. Seeing someone who had once held such a legendary title up close and ordinary in appearance was shocking. It forced them to rethink everything they thought they knew about heroism and bravery. This wasn't the kind of story taught in classrooms. It was real, lived experience, embodied in the woman moving silently among them. Even the Admiral, who had years of service and countless encounters with elite operatives, felt a subtle tension. He had underestimated her, assuming the moment was a joke. But now, he sensed the reality behind the calm exterior. There was a history here he did not fully know, a story that had been carefully hidden and protected. The audacity and quiet power in her presence reminded him that heroism often came from unexpected places, and that extraordinary people could exist in roles the world might never expect. The janitor's personal life added even more layers to the story. She was a single mother, raising her child with care and devotion while maintaining her work at the base. The balance she maintained was delicate, a daily challenge that required strength, patience, and unwavering focus. Many of her colleagues did not know about her home life, and yet, it was part of what made her remarkable. She had not only survived elite missions that tested the limits of human endurance and courage, but had also built a life of normalcy afterward. A life that required courage of a different kind. Every decision she made was shaped by responsibility, love, and discipline, traits that were as vital as any combat skill she had once possessed. As whispers continued, some people started to connect the dots. A few older officers remembered seeing mission reports with the name Night Viper coded in them. They had assumed it was a rumor or a legend, something exaggerated over time. But now, standing in front of them, was undeniable proof that legends were real. The janitor's calm composure, her precise movements, and the way she carried herself all pointed to someone who had lived through extraordinary experiences. Her ordinary appearance only amplified the intrigue. It was impossible to imagine someone so quiet and gentle had once been the center of high-stakes operations. Through all of this, she remained focused on her tasks. There was no attempt to explain herself, to boast, or to correct anyone's assumptions. Her past, her skills, and her identity as Night Viper existed in quiet parallel to her present life. She had learned that true strength did not need to be announced. It was enough to be capable, ready, and composed. Those who noticed her intensity could sense it without her needing to demonstrate it. The whispers, the stares, and the growing curiosity only confirmed that her quiet confidence had power. By the time the day moved forward, it was clear that she had left an impression that would not fade easily. The story of the janitor, who was also Night Viper, became a quiet legend within the base. Soldiers and staff would speak of it in hushed tones, some with awe, others with disbelief. But for her, nothing had changed. She had done what she had always done, moved with purpose, executed her duties flawlessly, and remained calm in the face of attention. Yet, unknowingly, she had reminded everyone around her that heroism, skill, and courage often exist in places the world would never expect, and that appearances could be deceiving. In the corridor, the janitor pushed her cart onward, seemingly ordinary, while the whispers of her past echoed behind her. She carried the quiet power of someone who had conquered unimaginable challenges, and she did it without anyone ever fully realizing it. That was her true strength, her ability to live an ordinary life while harboring the extraordinary, leaving everyone who glimpsed her past in awe and wonder. The day continued as usual at the base, but the energy in the corridors had changed. The whispers about Night Viper still floated through the air, and the soldiers who had once glanced at the janitor without a second thought now watched her with curiosity and a hint of respect. She moved quietly among them, pushing her cleaning cart, Yet there was a new awareness in how others observed her. Nobody fully understood what she was capable of, but the name she carried hinted at skills and experiences far beyond anything they had imagined. It was during a scheduled training drill that her true abilities began to reveal themselves. The drill was supposed to test the SEAL's speed, accuracy, and problem-solving under pressure. Obstacles were laid out across the training yard, walls to climb, ropes to swing from, narrow passages, and areas designed to simulate high-risk situations. The recruits and experienced soldiers were expected to navigate the course with precision, using all the training they had received. It was a standard exercise, nothing out of the ordinary for those at the base. But what happened next would leave everyone stunned. The drill began, and the SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, tackling obstacles and completing tasks with focus. Suddenly, a small error occurred in one section of the course. A rope snapped, and a timing sensor malfunctioned, creating confusion among the team. The exercise threatened to become chaotic, and the soldiers were struggling to regain control. It was at that moment that the janitor stepped forward. Nobody had asked her to join, and in fact, most assumed she would continue her work, quietly cleaning in the background. Yet, without hesitation, she moved toward the course with a calm confidence that drew every eye. She began navigating the obstacles with a precision and skill that no one expected. Her movements were fluid, almost effortless, but every step, jump, and climb demonstrated years of training and experience. She scaled walls as if they were no more than small barriers, swung across ropes with perfect timing, and moved through narrow passages with agility that seemed unnatural. Each action was calculated, controlled, and precise, leaving the SEALs and the instructors watching in awe. It was clear that this was no ordinary civilian, or even an ordinary former soldier. The recruits whispered to each other in disbelief. "Is she part of the exercise?" one asked, almost afraid to voice the thought. "She's moving like she's done this 1,000 times," another replied. The veteran SEALs were equally stunned. They had trained with some of the best, but the way she moved, the way she handled each challenge, was beyond what most of them could manage. It was as if the name Night Viper was not just a title. It was a warning, a statement of ability and danger. The drill quickly turned into a demonstration of her expertise. She identified weak points in the course, adjusted her approach mid-action, and completed tasks that even the best soldiers found challenging. It wasn't about showing off. There was no arrogance in her performance. Every movement had purpose and intent, designed to solve the problem efficiently and flawlessly. The quiet determination she displayed spoke volumes about the discipline and focus that had been honed over years of extreme situations. Even the instructors, who had overseen hundreds of drills, felt their assumptions shattered. The janitor, who had been dismissed in their minds as just another worker, had now become the most capable person on the course. She moved with the ease of someone who had faced real danger, someone who had survived situations where a single mistake could cost lives. There was an invisible aura around her, a calm power that demanded attention and respect without a word being spoken. The SEAL Admiral, who had been observing from a distance, froze in place. He had watched countless drills, trained with elite operatives, and led missions himself, yet nothing he had seen prepared him for this. The janitor's skill, control, and confidence reminded him of the stories he had only heard in classified briefings, the ones so secret they were almost mythical. Seeing her in action was like watching a legend come to life. The calm, quiet woman he had joked with just hours ago was someone who could outperform almost anyone in the room. As she finished the course flawlessly, the spectators were silent for a brief moment, unsure how to react. Then, slowly, the room filled with a mix of awe and admiration. Soldiers who had once laughed at her or ignored her were now looking at her with newfound respect. Even those who had not known her past could feel the weight of her presence. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. She was no longer just the janitor. She was Night Viper, the woman whose reputation had preceded her. And now, in undeniable reality, she had proven herself in a way that left everyone around her in shock. After completing the drill, she quietly walked away from the course, returning to her cleaning duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened. There was no fanfare, no celebration. That was never her way. Her strength was not in being recognized but in performing to the highest standard regardless of attention. Yet the effect of her actions lingered. The SEALs and instructors would not forget this display. Conversations about her skills spread quickly, with hushed tones of amazement and disbelief. For many, it was a lesson. Heroism and capability often exist where one least expects it, and appearances can be misleading. The janitor continued her day as if nothing had happened. But the training yard now held a new respect for her. She had demonstrated that her calm confidence, discipline, and skill were not just remnants of a past life. They were very much alive. The name Night Viper, once whispered and almost mythical, now had tangible proof. The Admiral and soldiers alike realized that extraordinary people could move quietly among them, accomplishing feats that defied imagination, and that sometimes, the most unassuming figures held the power to change everything around them. The SEAL Admiral stood frozen, his eyes locked on the janitor, who had just completed the obstacle course with unmatched precision. For a moment, it felt as if time had slowed around him. He had witnessed countless drills, faced dangerous missions, and worked alongside some of the most elite operatives in the world. Yet nothing had prepared him for what he was seeing now. The calm, quiet janitor who had been pushing a cleaning cart just hours ago was demonstrating skill, composure, and tactical awareness that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, the best soldiers he had trained with. He could barely move, caught between disbelief and awe. Every action she had taken during the drill reminded him of stories he had only heard in classified briefings. Tales of operatives who executed high-risk missions with deadly precision, who could remain calm under extreme pressure, and who could adapt instantly to any unexpected challenge. Yet here she was, in plain sight, in her janitor uniform, performing those same feats without hesitation, without a hint of struggle, and without any desire for recognition. The Admiral's mind raced as he tried to reconcile what he had just witnessed with what he had assumed about her. Earlier that day, he had asked her call sign as a joke, expecting something playful or humorous. Instead, she had said Night Viper. And now he understood the weight behind that name. It was not just a title, it was a symbol of someone who had lived through missions most people could not even imagine. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had underestimated her, and the consequences of that underestimation were staring him directly in the face. Around him, the other soldiers were also reacting, though less dramatically. Some whispered to each other, struggling to believe what they had just seen. Others exchanged glances, nodding subtly in recognition of her skill. A few of the more experienced operatives understood immediately. They had read the reports, heard the code name, and now they realized that the legend was real. Night Viper was not a story to be told lightly. Yet here she was, a living, breathing embodiment of the name, proving everything with her actions rather than words. The Admiral's freeze was not just physical, it was mental. He had spent years commanding troops, assessing talent, and making split-second decisions under pressure. Yet he found himself unable to dismiss the truth staring back at him. He had underestimated the janitor because of appearances, because of assumptions about her role, because he had allowed his own biases to cloud his judgment. And in that instant, he understood a profound lesson. Skill, courage, and heroism often exist in unexpected places, and the world is full of people whose abilities are hidden beneath ordinary exteriors. He observed her carefully, noting the subtle details that spoke volumes about her experience. The way she moved, always efficient and deliberate, reflected a mind trained for tactical awareness. Her focus, unbroken even under the eyes of dozens of observers, revealed the discipline of someone accustomed to high-stakes environments. Her calm demeanor, untouched by chaos or attention, was the mark of someone who had faced life-and-death situations and emerged not only alive but in control. Every element of her presence reinforced the truth he could no longer ignore. This was no ordinary janitor. This was a warrior, a strategist, and a legend hidden in plain sight. Even the smallest movements told a story. The way she adjusted her footing on uneven surfaces, the instant calculation of angles and distances, the effortless handling of obstacles that had challenged the trained SEALs. All of it was evidence of a mind and body finely tuned through years of elite service. The Admiral realized that he had witnessed someone who had operated in situations where hesitation was fatal, where every decision carried unimaginable stakes. And yet, despite the danger and pressure she had faced in the past, she carried herself now with humility and quiet purpose. There was no arrogance, no need to assert superiority. Her skill was its own testament. As the drill ended and the janitor quietly returned to her cleaning duties, the Admiral remained where he was, stunned. His colleagues, though amazed, quickly moved on, treating the event as a remarkable anomaly. But for him, the realization lingered. He had been confronted with the truth that extraordinary people often hide in plain sight, blending seamlessly into ordinary roles, and that judging someone by their outward appearance could lead to profound misjudgments. The freeze he felt was a combination of respect, awe, and the weight of understanding. He was witnessing a living legend, someone who had transcended the boundaries of ordinary life to embody something far greater. The impact of the moment was not lost on the base. Though she continued to push her cart and clean with quiet efficiency, those who had seen her performance were changed. The SEALs, recruits, and even other staff began to look at her differently. What had been a routine day now carried an unspoken recognition that she was someone to be admired, someone whose story was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Her past missions, hidden achievements, and incredible skill were now hinted at in the way she moved, the calm she exuded, and the aura of quiet authority she carried. For the Admiral, the lesson was personal. He had underestimated her, assumed she was ordinary, and had been proven wrong in the most undeniable way. The freeze he experienced was both literal and symbolic, a moment of realization that greatness often lies where you least expect it, and that courage, skill, and determination are not always visible until they are revealed. Night Viper had made him stop, reconsider, and ultimately respect her in a way that words could never capture. And so, as she quietly continued her work, the Admiral and everyone who had witnessed her actions carried a new understanding. They had seen a glimpse of the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary, and it would stay with them forever. The janitor was more than she appeared, and her presence had changed the way they would see the world, reminding them that legends could live quietly among them, waiting for the right moment to show their true strength. After the drill, the air in the base was thick with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Soldiers and staff who had watched the janitor, this quiet, unassuming woman, navigate the obstacles with unmatched precision were still trying to process what they had seen. Her calm movements, perfect timing, and tactical brilliance had left everyone stunned. But the most important reaction came from the SEAL Admiral. He had seen countless elite operatives in his career, yet he had never witnessed skill and composure quite like this. For him, the janitor had transformed from a simple, everyday worker into a figure of respect and admiration. The Admiral approached her slowly, his expression no longer playful. Earlier, when he had asked for her call sign as a joke, he had expected laughter. Now, he understood that the name she had spoken, Night Viper, was not a joke, and the woman behind it was extraordinary. As he walked toward her, the other soldiers instinctively stepped back, giving space to the moment that had quietly become historic in its own way. Even those who didn't fully understand her past could feel the weight of her presence. When he finally reached her, he paused for a moment, studying her calm, composed demeanor. There was no arrogance, no boasting, just quiet confidence. She looked up at him, eyes steady, and offered a small, polite nod, acknowledging his approach without any expectation of recognition. The Admiral felt a surge of respect. He extended his hand, not in jest, but with genuine admiration. "I have to admit," he said quietly, "I underestimated you." His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen it all, yet realized he had misjudged the person in front of him. The janitor simply nodded again, her expression unchanged. For her, recognition had never been the goal. She had done her duty, performed to the best of her ability, and continued her work with quiet focus. The admiration she inspired was not something she sought. It was a natural consequence of her skills, discipline, and integrity. She had learned long ago that true respect is earned through action, not words, and that those who truly understand greatness will recognize it without needing it to be announced. Around them, the other soldiers began to react. Some whispered to each other, sharing their astonishment and newfound respect. "I can't believe she did that," one said, shaking his head. "All this time, we thought she was just a janitor," another replied. Even seasoned operatives, who had heard the name Night Viper in classified reports, were in awe. They had known the reputation, but seeing her in action brought it to life in a way no report or story could ever convey. The janitor had proven that her extraordinary past was not just a legend. It was reality. The SEAL Admiral continued speaking, his tone now filled with sincerity. "You've earned respect today not because of who you were, but because of what you showed all of us. Your skill, your discipline, your focus. It's remarkable." He paused, letting the words settle. Around him, the soldiers nodded, some still in disbelief, some clearly inspired. The moment had become a lesson for everyone present. That appearances can be deceiving, and that extraordinary people often live quietly among the ordinary, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true strength. The janitor, true to her nature, did not bask in praise. She returned to her duties, pushing her cleaning cart with the same calm precision she had shown throughout the day. Her actions were a quiet reminder that humility is a strength in itself. She had demonstrated her capabilities without seeking attention, yet the impact of her actions could not be ignored. Soldiers who had doubted her, overlooked her, or even joked about her role now looked at her with a mixture of respect and wonder. Her colleagues began to see her differently, not just as a janitor, but as someone who carried a history of courage and skill that few could imagine. They realized that the quiet, modest woman they had known for months or years was capable of feats they had only read about in secret briefings. The respect she earned was not instantaneous or forced. It was the natural outcome of her actions, her integrity, and the way she had carried herself through the day. Even the SEALs who were younger or newer to the base learned an important lesson. They had witnessed humility paired with extraordinary skill, and they saw firsthand that true leadership and respect come not from titles or appearances, but from competence, discipline, and the way one handles challenges. The janitor had become a living example of what it meant to be exceptional, even while living an ordinary life. By the end of the day, her story had begun to spread quietly throughout the base. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones about Night Viper, about the janitor who had moved through obstacles with the skill of a seasoned operative, and about the lesson they had all learned. Never underestimate anyone, and always look beyond the surface. The janitor herself remained unchanged, quietly finishing her work, yet the admiration she had earned lingered. Her actions had shifted the perception of everyone around her, leaving a lasting impression that would not fade anytime soon. The janitor's journey that day was a testament to the power of quiet strength and humility. She had shown that true capability does not need to be announced, and that respect is earned through actions, not words. Even in a room full of elite soldiers and leaders, she had stood out, not because she demanded attention, but because her excellence and composure made it impossible to ignore. The SEAL Admiral and everyone present had witnessed something rare and remarkable. A woman who embodied skill, courage, and humility in equal measure, forever changing the way they would see her, and perhaps the world around them. The day was ending at the naval base, but the impact of what had happened earlier still lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. The janitor, who had quietly completed the obstacle course with precision and calm, returned to her duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Her cleaning cart moved steadily down the corridor, and she worked with the same careful attention to detail she always had. Yet the atmosphere around her had changed. Soldiers whispered in corners, glances followed her as she moved, and a quiet respect had settled over those who had seen her in action. For them, she was no longer just a janitor. She was someone extraordinary. The SEAL Admiral, who had been one of the first to recognize her skill and composure, watched from a distance. He had spent years commanding troops, training elite operatives, and facing dangerous situations, but what he had seen that day had left a lasting impression. Night Viper was no longer just a name from classified files. It was a living, breathing reality. The Admiral understood that her quiet actions, her discipline, and her skill were more powerful than any display of authority or titles. He knew that this woman, who moved humbly among the base, carried with her a legacy of courage and excellence that could inspire others for years to come. Even though she had returned to her janitorial duties, her influence was evident. Soldiers who had laughed at her or ignored her before now regarded her with a newfound respect. They whispered about her past, speculating about the missions she might have been part of, the dangers she had faced, and the skill it must have taken to earn a call sign like Night Viper. Some were amazed, others in disbelief, but all were changed by the simple truth. Extraordinary people often live quiet lives, hiding their achievements in plain sight, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment to reveal their greatness. Her humility made the admiration even more powerful. She did not boast or seek praise. She did not demand recognition or accolades. She simply continued her work, performing every task with care and precision. Her example showed that true greatness is not about being seen or celebrated, but about performing one's duties with excellence, no matter how small or unnoticed those tasks might seem. Every step she took, every corridor she cleaned, became a lesson for those around her. Respect is earned through skill, discipline, and integrity, not through titles or appearances. In the following days, the story of the janitor spread quietly but steadily throughout the base. Soldiers spoke of Night Viper in hushed tones, sharing the tale with new recruits and colleagues alike. The legend of her past missions and incredible skill became a topic of curiosity and inspiration. Even those who had never seen her perform the drill began to treat her with respect, knowing that beneath her ordinary appearance lay someone extraordinary. It was a reminder that heroism does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it quietly walks among you, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Her influence extended beyond admiration. Younger recruits began to observe her more closely, learning from the way she moved, the precision in her actions, and the calm confidence she exuded. They realized that there was more to strength and skill than physical power or flashy displays. Discipline, patience, focus, and humility were equally important, and the janitor embodied all of these qualities effortlessly. In many ways, she became an unspoken teacher, guiding those around her through her example rather than words. Even the SEAL Admiral reflected on the lesson she had given. He had been so accustomed to assessing people by their positions, experience, and appearances that he had almost overlooked the greatest lesson. True capability is not always obvious, and the most extraordinary people often exist in ordinary roles. Night Viper had reminded him that perception can be deceiving, and that humility and excellence often travel together, quietly changing the world without anyone noticing. The freeze he had felt earlier was not just a moment of shock. It was the recognition of a rare and powerful truth about human potential. At home, the janitor continued her life as a single mother, balancing work and family with quiet determination. She never sought fame or glory, yet her story had left a mark on the naval base that would last far longer than a single day. Her legacy was not in awards or recognition, but in the inspiration she had provided, the respect she had earned, and the lesson she had demonstrated. Extraordinary courage and skill can exist anywhere, in anyone, even in those we least expect. By the end of the week, the base had been subtly transformed. People moved differently around her. Conversations carried her name with reverence, and a quiet sense of possibility had taken hold. Her story reminded everyone that heroism, discipline, and strength do not always come with titles or medals. Sometimes, they come in the form of a janitor quietly performing her duties while carrying a history of extraordinary courage and skill. As she pushed her cart down the corridor one last time that day, she was unaware of the lasting impression she had left. Soldiers watched her. New recruits whispered about the legend of Night Viper, and the SEAL Admiral reflected on the lessons he had learned. It was a quiet, almost invisible influence, but it was powerful beyond measure. She had proven that extraordinary people can live ordinary lives, that skill and courage are not always obvious, and that humility does not diminish greatness, it defines it. In the end, the janitor's story became a lasting memory for everyone who had witnessed it. Her legacy was not in trophies or recognition but in the respect, awe, and inspiration she had quietly inspired. She had shown, without trying, that true heroism can exist anywhere, and that the most extraordinary people are often the ones who appear the most ordinary. Night Viper had returned to the shadows of her everyday life, but her influence, her lesson, and her quiet power would remain, forever changing the way people viewed greatness, courage, and the human spirit.